So in sharing my experience and to give my advice about cues, I'll start off with just my experience. When I first started playing pool, my girlfriend, who's now my wife, was staying in a dorm, and the guys were not allowed to go to the rooms. So when I would go pick her up, I had to wait in the lobby. And next to the lobby was a gigantic old ballroom. This was a beautiful dorm. It was built during the Depression. It was a WPA dorm. And in this ballroom, they had a grand piano, and they had a 10-foot Brunswick pool table. Beautiful old pool table. And that's where I really got interested and started in the game. Now, of course, the cues that we had to play with there were terrible. They were old, busted house cues, didn't have a good tip on them. You know, it was tough playing with it. So I decided I loved the game enough. I was intrigued enough with playing there because we had nothing else to do. We were broke. It was a small town, small university town, nothing to do. I drove up to Shreveport and I bought a cue from the Academy. It was one of those really cheap poplar cues. It was a beautiful cue, but it only lasted about a week. And I destroyed the end. The last 4 inches of the cue just detonated. So a few months go by and I moved to Baton Rouge. She graduated and we're all on the move. So in that first cue I spent $20 on it. So the next cue I moved up, I leveled up. I spent $40 on it. And it just never felt right. And again, the ferrule cracked on it, and it lasted a few months, and it was really a tough experience trying to learn and play with it. So what I did, by this time I've moved to New Orleans, go to Airline Highway, and I pick up an Earl Strickland Q-Tech cue, which I still play with to this day. Ended up going full circle and going back to playing with it, but I'll get to that later. So I pick up this Earl Strickland cue, and it had a fiberglass True Glide SST shaft on it, just like you would see on ESPN. Because Q-Tech at the time sponsored Earl, they sponsored Allison Fisher, and they sponsored a lot of the bigger tournaments. So Q-Tech was a name that I saw the pros using, and it was affordable. I think I paid about $110 for it. Proud as a guy could be about my cue. And so that was the cue that I really learned with. And so I get to playing more, reading more, hearing more, and met some guys that were big cue guys. And I have to admit, I'm not as nearly as knowledgeable as a lot of people are about cues, but I know enough, I believe, to make informed decisions. So I played for a while with the Q-Tech, and then I thought, well, maybe if I got a more expensive cue, somehow it would improve my game. So the next purchase I made was a McDermott cue. And I had to end up sending it back because the first one they sent me was warped. But then I got that one, and then it didn't improve anything. There was no noticeable, discernible difference between how I played with the McDermott and then the Q-Tech. So around about that time, I would say this is in the area of the mid-2000s, I discovered low deflection technology. And this is about the time, I don't know if Predator had started at this time, but in any case, it's when I discovered Predator. I bought a Predator Sneaky Pete that I loved. It was a Coca-Cola Sneaky Pete with a 314 shaft on it. And the only problem that I ever had, well, I actually had two problems with that cue. One, the ferrule kept cracking on the end of it, and I had to send it back a couple of times. But the real deal breaker was the quick release joint wouldn't hold the cue together. It'd be in the middle of playing with it, and it was the cue would start to come apart, and never could resolve that issue with the cue, even by buying, when the 314-2 shaft came out, did not resolve the problem. So I went back to playing with the Q-Tech, And that's when Q-Tech started getting into the low deflection shaft business. So I don't remember what I bought their first one, and then I bought the R360, and I still have both of those shafts. But there was just something about it. I wanted to keep looking, keep searching. So then I bought, or when I was doing my YouTube, OB ended up giving me an OB Sneaky Pete, which was great. It was really a great cue. And then it was after the OB that I decided to step away from the game for a while. Now, when I came back to the game, I was playing with the OB2 shaft. I bought another OB. I think I bought the OB2. It's the one with the wood, the layered kind of laminated ferrule. And I had a friend of mine, good friend of mine, we just played this morning. He suggested that I get into the carbon scene. So he suggested the Q-Tech Synergy Cue. So I purchased the Q-Tech Synergy Cue. It's on my my Earl Strickland butt, and that's my everyday player. Couldn't be more happy with it. It's I believe it. I play a ball or two better than I ever did with any of the other cues that I've owned, or shafts. But I say all that to say this: throughout my pool playing time, my pool playing interest, I've never been the guy to get the cue bug, where I just was always looking at the next cue or the next shaft. So the two main pieces of advice that, in my opinion, about cues is I read a book by a great player of yesteryear named Babe Cranfield. He's probably the greatest player in history that you've never heard of. He was a straight pool champion who was kind of like the precursor to Mosconi. Their careers overlapped, but he was the heavy hitter, I believe, just before Mosconi. You can fact check me on that. If I'm wrong about that, about the timing, please correct me. But Cranfield made two observations about pool. One, he said you always want to be playing on a different types of tables. So you want variety in the types of tables that you play on. But he said you always want to find one cue and you want to stick with it. So he was saying you never want to jump from cue to cue to cue to cue, because you're always having to try to relearn, try to remaster the feel for the cue that you play with. And I believe that advice kind of is a nice dovetail into my next point about cues. Is it better to play with a low deflection shaft, or is it better to play with your more traditional, old school, high deflection shafts? What's going to make me a better player? And the answer, I think Babe Cranfield has had the answer for that, is that either or can do that for you. You just have to pick one. You have to learn it, and then you have to stick with it. You need to put you need to put the thought of cues and equipment improving your game out of your mind. So, to give you a good illustration of that, John Schmidt, who for a brief time broke Mosconi's record, he was the world record straight pool record holder. He said that he learned how to compensate for squirt and swerve, and that was built instinctively into his game. And when he tried to move over to a low deflection shaft, he struggled greatly. He couldn't run balls with a low deflection shaft because he was so used to the older style of equipment. And I'm also here to say that another point I would like to make is that for me, other than picking a cue like I have that works for me, you also need to find a tip. I think the most important part of the most single important part of the whole cue is your tip. you need to find a tip that works for you. And my tip, I always like to play with a soft to a super soft tip, because I believe in the biggest difference I can ever tell from one cue to the next is the difference in the hardness and consistency of the tip. So I've always felt like that on a power draw or a shot where I'm jacked up and I'm trying to get some draw, where I'm hitting somewhere extremely outside of center on the cue ball, I've always felt like that the softer tip gives me a better grab and I'm less likely to miscue. So I have settled on shooting with a soft Kamui tip, or even better is the Kamui Super Soft. Those are the tips I'm going to play with probably for the rest of my life. But again, it's something that you need to find, something that works for you, and you need to stick with it. And then you need to put all the gimmicks and the sales pitches and everything else out of your mind, and just kind of let that cue become part of you. And the only other thing that I think I would like to add to that is you always want a cue where if it gets stolen, or which happens all the time here in Houston, if your cue gets stolen or damaged or whatever, you don't want it to be such an oddball thing that you can't at least get a shaft for something similar. But so this video has gone on long enough. Those are my thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts are about cues. Maybe there's something I've left out that you think is important. Let me know. All right, guys. That's all I got. Have a good one. Peace.